All right, what is going on, everyone? And welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast. We are live at this very moment on YouTube and on X to recap this week's Mets versus White Sox series, as well as all of the other news and rumors over the past few days in Mets land. You guys know the drill already. But before we do that, I have to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel for this very podcast, which is now recorded live on Sundays and Thursdays regularly. Today is a Monday. Sometimes it gets lined up with a series like that, following every single series of games. And for those of you who are watching on playback in the future, you want to join the conversation, make sure to turn on those post notifications to know when we do go live. For those of you in the live chat right now, I want to let you guys know we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns, all of your instant thoughts on this team. And if you feel like you're being ignored, you're not being ignored. They're just being starred throughout the show, and we'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. Also, remember to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok, which mainly features Frank, who is not here today, his instant reactions after every single Mets game, titled the Mets Frankly Post Game. As well, with the TikTok, we are about 40 followers away from 1,000, which I believe when we hit 1,000, we can stream these shows on TikTok as well. So for those of you who have not followed us on TikTok, you want to push us over the edge there, it would be greatly appreciated. As for the audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all of your favorite listening platforms, Spotify, Apple Play, Podcasts, whatever you feel like it. To not miss the audio version of these episodes that go up the following day at 9 a.m. So without further ado, let's get into episode number 79, and pretty much straightforward here. The Mets are coming off a series with the White Sox. They swept them on the road, and I think it's easy to say, and Andrew, I think you can agree with me here, is that they did what they needed to do. There's no real sugarcoating. They needed to beat this team 3 times. They did it. The White Sox are horrendous, and they beat them. They did it. They got the job done, and now they're in a really good spot where they're just one game out of that final wild card spot, and all of that just turned in one weekend.
Yeah, again, it's the White Sox. It's expected. You also got help externally, which again you can't bank on, but you did get help from the Philadelphia Phillies, taking 2 out of 3. So you thank Philadelphia, them disgusting human beings, but you take a couple wins, and again now you're back to one game out of the third wild card spot. But again, if you want me to be Mr. Positive, with the Diamondbacks and the Padres faltering in small cases of what the Mets did last week. Now there's an argument that all the wild card spots are now back in play, with them just being 3 games apiece at all of them. So now you're getting back to that cluster. You also have the Cubs, who have been white hot. They're sticking their nose back into this race, which is not good for us. But for us, the White Sox, again, they didn't light them up. I won't finish the statement that I said last week. They didn't, blow up the fireworks as they should have been. But, and I even made the joke, oh, they're going to win 1-0. Well, they won 2-0 in a game, because I could give it was the crochet start. But again, you saw the bullpen pitch well. You got some good starts from your starting pitching, people you expect and don't expect to give you good outings, and you beat a god-awful ball club. Like, I'm not going to give you a cookie. You did your job. Good job. You kept pace, and you gained ground. Now you have an opponent in a different color of socks who are a lot better baseball team.
Yeah, and again, like, I don't really think we got to see the very worst of the White Sox, because I think that they pitched fairly well in this series as compared to what we really expected. But just overall, the constant mistakes that they make on the base pass, the constant mistakes they make defensively, they're just not a good team at all. They are a different level of horrendous. And I think that when you come into on the road, when you're playing a team that is inferior to you in every single way, in every single category, to every single team in the league, I'm pretty sure in every single category from all aspects of the game, the Chicago White Sox are the dead last. Whether you're talking about defense, offense, base running, they're just terrible at everything. And I think that when you go into a road series like this, sometimes there's this home field advantage that goes into it. Sometimes you're just playing a team that's inferior. They have nothing to play for. But when you go into a White Sox team that is so dead awful, like a different level of terrible, none of those factors should matter. We've seen the Mets falter against a lot of sub 500 teams this year. We've seen them do that a lot, play down to their opponent. We've seen a lot of those things happen over the years, not just this year, years before that. We lost to some teams that weren't competitive in 2022, which was one of the main stingers that got the Braves back into it and winning the division. Neither of that ended up mattering, obviously, because the Phillies were the team that went to the World Series. But again, different point. But with the White Sox, again, it's a different level. Like, this team is so awful and so terrible by like the actual standards of terrible this year, even though you have no teams that are like the powerhouses. You don't have any 23 Yankees anymore. You don't have any 90s Braves anymore. But you still come into Chicago with that on your mind as to where, things could go wrong because the Mets are a little bit more tense than these teams. White Sox have absolutely nothing to play for. And it was really weird, and I will actually swing this back to you, Andrew. Them taking out Garrett Crochet, I would say, was a little bit of a choice in that third game. Obviously, the White Sox don't really care what's going on the field from top to bottom. But I was very shocked to see them really just pull the plug like they did, especially when they had him having such a an incredible start, striking out the first 7 batters. And then that first run came in off of Francisco Lindor. They got a few runners on, and then they just pulled the plug like that, just quick. I was so confused because I'm like sitting there like, oh, they must be saving his arm for the playoffs. Like, no, they're not. They ain't going anywhere. So that was weird, but it definitely, we still had our advantage there. Mets didn't really capitalize with him coming out of the game, but what did you think, your thoughts on that? Because, like, that was very odd. I've never seen a guy dominate through the first 7 batters, just absolutely carve them up. Never seen that happen. And then all of a sudden, he just runs out of gas and they just take him out. That was just very, very odd.
Yeah, it could be a
not
things
due
if
to
this was
injury.
actually...
Yes, I know, Jake. That happened to Jake once, but okay, I get it.
Once? A few times. But
Yes.
Besides the point, if the White Sox were an intelligent franchise, them pulling him, because the rest, he maybe has, 3 more starts left in the year? Maybe 4,
Yeah.
if that. You're going nowhere. He's 95% getting traded this offseason. So if this was a smart organization, was to get him some work, all right, gave it to Homer and Lindor, whatever, I wouldn't have pulled him right away, especially for a guy who was a reliever and that came up as a reliever. You would think you'd want to stretch him back out. But again, also you have him coming off Tommy John surgery. So again, that was, and you had the whole clown show that was the pre-trade deadline and all the contract stuff. And so...
Yeah.
If this was a team that was like intelligent enough to say, you know what, let's not kill him, the season does not matter, and we're going to trade him anyway, it makes sense. But again, it was just the way they did it. Again, it's so White Sox that again they're just trying to tank, and I'm gonna laugh because of course they are gonna be the worst team in baseball, and now there's no longer a guarantee of them getting the number 1 overall pick. And don't be surprised if this new draft lottery they have like the 6th pick. And I'm going to laugh. They're going to break the 62 Mets record, and they're not even going to get the number 1 pick this year.
Yeah.
Potentially. But, again, it could be... Again, that organization's very dumb, but it could, if they were trying to be smart, just trying to save an asset that they have, that's that, and potentially the guy we'll talk about in a second, that's their way to replenish their future, because they don't have a good farm system, and the ones they did, now they were all traded or washed up now. So... those 2 guys are kind of the pillars of potentially their next future. So it doesn't surprise me, but it was very odd how just get them out.
Yeah, such a weird momentum shift because we were seeing, obviously the Mets getting mowed down completely. Like the first 7 batters he struck out, he was perfect for the first 3 innings, and then, a lot of fans have talked about Garrett Crochet and his ability to not go deep into games and give the team volume. And I was kind of like, oh, maybe this is far-fetched. He's got good stuff. He knows how he get these swings and misses. He's a good pitcher. But no, that is exactly what, like, he ran out of gas in that fourth inning. Like, he just completely disappeared. I don't know what the hell. He looked like completely different. Fastball was not moving the way it was in those first three innings. No command of his breaking stuff, and he just looked completely different. It was so weird. But this isn't a White Sox podcast, of course. But it was just such a weird momentum shift as to where, the Mets were in that hole of where they couldn't even get anything off of this guy. And then all of a sudden, they finally get a dent into it because Francisco Lindor, having a ridiculous season, continues to stay hot. And then it all just really quickly changed. It was so weird. But it did kind of help us, I guess, get the sweep that they needed. They needed to get, no matter what. They needed to get the job done. And speaking of getting the job done, let's just get into the full series rundown. As the Mets did sweep this entire series, so it's all good news, shall we say. Tyler McGill made his return in Game 1 to the majors, putting up a solid outing, 5 1/3 innings pitched, 1-run ball, just 1 walk, 6 strikeouts. Jesse Winker had a 3-hit game and an RBI. JD Martinez homered as well. Lindor, Nimmo, Vientos, McNeil, and Alvarez all had hits in this game as well. The Mets bullpen did finish it off clean. Ottavino, Garrett, Maton, and Edwin Diaz on a third straight day of work for the first time this year, ending off a 5-1 victory in Game 1. Game 2, Jose Quintana was his usual self, putting everybody's to sleep for the first 5 innings, walking 3 batters, striking out 6, allowing 2 runs, loads of full counts, plenty of laboring put away, the usual trademark. But on the offensive side, Pete Alonso would open up the scoring with a 2-run shot. Jesse Winker followed him up with a solo shot as a part of back-to-back 3-hit games for Winker. Marte would add to the lead with an RBI single. Lindor, Nimmo, Vientos all would reach base safely multiple times in this game, and the bullpen would wrap it up from there. Brazaban, Stanek, Maton would all put up scoreless innings. Budo would struggle in the 9th, but he would finish it off to secure the series win, 5-3. And on the series finale, Sean Manaea was brilliant once again. 7 scoreless innings, just 2 hits, 5 strikeouts after Garrett Crochet carved us up for 3 straight innings. Like we said, the Mets took advantage of the innings limit, creating traffic in the 4th after Francisco Lindor hit his 29th home run of the year. Mark Vientos also had a 2-hit game. Iglesias, Marte, and Terens all had hits as well. Marte drove in a run in the 9th. A scoreless 8th from Reed Garrett, and Edwin Diaz in full-on vintage form, striking out the side to complete the anticipated sweep of the White Sox, and the Mets now sit at 73-64, now just 1 game back of the Braves for that final wild card spot. If they win tonight, it will be a half a game because the Braves do not play today, as they will face the Red Sox, which is in about an hour-ish, hour and 10, around there. But the full-on takeaways from this series, like we said, they got the job done. They did what they needed to do. But one thing I will say, the offense was underwhelming in this series. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory, especially when combined in this 3-game series. And I'll swing it over to you. They went 4 for 22 with runners in scoring position in this series. Was not their best offensive performance, but again, I said this on Twitter. Could it be that there are some underlying issues with this Mets offense going into September, or is it just really does not take much to beat this White Sox team where they give up a run and they just completely drop dead? Both of them can be true, but what do you think? I don't know, because I think it was a little questionable. Let's just say that. Wins are wins, but it is the Chicago White Sox. Let's just say that. A bullpen that isn't good, may I add.
Yeah, like we've hinted at, and I hinted at in the last show previewing the series, I thought this would have been the get-right series for offensively. Kind of was the bullpen side. Again, Stanek had a good inning. Brasbon had a bounce back series overall. Again, Mayton continues to be pretty solid. Diaz, again, a really good bounce back series, especially what happened in the Arizona series. Gets relatively clean saves, or innings, if you want to call it that. Again, the offense is concerning, but we've seen the same issues throughout the whole season. This isn't like just randomly this series. Oh, they couldn't hit runners in score position against the White Sox. This is how this offense is acted, and when it's red hot, it's unstoppable. You saw that in the Grimace Game Met era, where they were just beating the hell out of everybody. But then you look at what they are. I mean, they're inconsistent with runners in scoring position. There's some series where they hit well, and then there's like 50, they go 0 for 15, and you rip your damn heart out because most of them come with less than 2 outs, and you get a guy on third or second, and he doesn't score, or he has the bases loaded and doesn't score. But again, if we're gonna just keep talking, Jesse Winky is my favorite New York Met, and he has fit in. It took a little bit to fit in, but he has fit this team. And I think I said this in the offseason about the bullpen, where like you had a bunch of generic white dudes. He adds an edge like Tommy Pham did last year, except this is a more positive edge that Jesse Winker has added. And now you're starting to see the power, because I saw everyone complaining. I think you even at points were complaining about like, oh, he's getting singles, but he's not doing anything productive. Now
I don't know. Like, it's really weird with me, because I don't think I was just saying really he was just getting singles. My problem was I was seeing him take a lot of called strike threes, a lot of weird ass swings. Like, just the pitch selection was not what I expected it to be, especially for a guy who gets on base as much as he did. But he settled in recently. Continue.
And you're starting to see him now drive the ball. It's not like he's still getting his like base hits up the middle, but now he's starting to drive the ball. Obviously, the walk-off homers again this series, goes back to back with Pete, and he has an edge. And he saw the double in Arizona. Like, he's coming up clutch when you need him to, and is a part of big rallies late in games. Absolutely. Speaking of what you said, I get Francisco Alvarez is concerning the shit out of me, and the fact of he's going. And I hate that I'm going to say this name. It's almost Vogelbackian, the way some of his ABs are going. Because he'll swing a two slide in the opposite situation.
I guess that's a word
he'll
now.
Swing a two sliders. That's a word now. He'll swing first pitch 2 sliders down and away, and then he just looks at a fastball right down the middle. It has been so consistent the second half of the season, especially.
He's lost.
Where, like,
he's absolutely lost.
He's completely lost. And, like, he obviously hits some hanging sliders throughout his short major league career. He's got some, but like he's supposed to be a fastball hitter, and he's swinging, filling for these 2-0-2 getting himself already into 0-2 counts, and then either his head he's thinking of a third slider coming, and they just blow a fastball right down the middle. I'm like, and that has happened to him a lot in the second half. Is that thumb injury still lingering? But you can say that. But
I hope
still,
that's the case.
It is, but mental. Is this something again? Because he's a fastball hitter. How is he just in the White Sox series, in the Diamondback series? He's taking like Vogelback fastballs right down the middle. I'm like, what are you doing? So I'm hoping it's just him, the lingering, and him just being in between, because I get it's the catcher position, and I know the offensive value for a catcher is not high, and he could still provide that, but this is getting to a little bit of a concern because he's not being able to throw guys out anymore. Where like that, he had that stretch last year where he was throwing guys out. His rookie year, he didn't really throw anybody out. Now he can't throw anybody out to save his life. He's still great defensively, framing and everything else, but we wanted this to be a bat first catcher, and the power's gone, and he's not hitting much. So I get it. It's a catching position. The value for offense is very low, and he can provide, hit that benchmark of just the productivity from the catcher. But this was supposed to be, the number one prospect in baseball. This was a guy that everyone could, even though Adley's been god-awful the second half, like, people say, oh, he's better than Adley Rutschman. Like, and he has been horrendous. Not just in this series, but just in general in the second half. And it is something to be concerned about. That, maybe this is, again, he's 21 years old. This is like that sophomore slump, sure. But just the way in his approach at the plate of just taking fastballs right down the middle, I'm like, it's just ridiculous.
I mean, we know what the problem is. We know what the problem is, and we've already discussed it. I'm not even going to get into it anymore because it's just even ridiculous. But if you want to go full on to just like the numbers with Alvarez, he's at a career high in called strike rate. He's at called strike and whiff rate. He's over 30%, which is Vogelbach territory. It is. So it's concerning. It really is. And this type of approach that they have him doing, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And to be honest, I'm not even going to get into it, to be honest, because we already have. If you guys want to check out some of our recent episodes, we've talked about that. But he's not hitting the ball hard. He really is not doing anything when the ball is put in play. The quality of contact is terrible. And this has really just become a waste of a season for him. It really has. And that's really how I've viewed it. And I am done. I'm done psychoanalyzing it. I really am. Because there's only one change that needs to be made, and we all know what it is. And I'm not talking about it anymore. I'm tired, and I've already accepted that this is a lost season for Francisco Alvarez. And a lot of things do need to change because the development of a young player cannot be under these types of circumstances. But hey, whatever. We've got geniuses running the show anyway, so who cares? But other takeaways from this series, what else can we put out here? Obviously, Edwin Diaz having a good series as well. We'll get into him in a second. I was a little bit worried when Reed Garrett came in, but then I realized he was pretty much like the only reliever that they had available at that current moment to pitch the eighth inning. Good they got 7 from Minaya, because if Minaya got knocked out from some of those walks he had in the middle of that start, but he was able to recover well, it would have been, kind of a shit show. You probably would have had to push Budo even more for long relief. And you were in quite a weird thing. I mean, you had Alex Young there, but was he even there yet? He was there in Chicago with them.
Yeah.
I guess he was one guy that they had him available, but he wasn't going to go multiple innings. So Reed Garrett was the guy that was available, but he looked good. That was probably one of the best outings I've seen from him for a while. Slowly but surely, I'd say Alonso's starting to come along a little bit, contributing to the offense, but still the runners in scoring position, the situational hitting with him has been horrendous. Some of the worst in all of baseball, if not the worst. Francisco Lindor continues to contribute because he's just played like the most valuable player, not only on this team, but arguably in the league. We talked about that last episode. Nimmo is starting to just roll along again. It looked like he was getting it going in Arizona a little bit, but he just does not look like himself. JD Martinez, who will not be available for this series, but he's on paternity leave with DJ Stewart getting called up. DJ Stewart had JD Martinez had a pretty good series as well. I mean, I think there's not really much to dissect here because, like we've said, they did what they needed to do. And they did the job that was expected from them. And again, we're not going to give massive applause to that because I think that at the end of the day, this team, like we've said so many times before, is so terrible that anything less than a sweep would have been an absolute disgrace. We've talked about that many, many times last episode. They needed to win all 3 of these games. Was it pretty? No. But W in the win column 3 times in a row. We'll take that. And it put us in a really good position in the playoff race, as we can obviously see. 1 game out. We could be a half a game out. If we win tonight, we'll see what happens. But as for overall performances in this series, I remembered to do it after the rundown. I always keep pushing it down because it's always at the bottom of the list for us. But let's get to studs and duds. Best way to recap this one. One player that was really good in this series, and we want to give some flowers to. One guy who was not great, and we kind of want to shove under the bus. Again, a sweep. Good performances all around, I would say. Great team efforts from all 3 games. But, there's our guys that stand out that are a little bit yucky, let's just say. Let's start with studs. Andrew, what do you think? I think I know what direction you're going with because you already kind of pointed it out.
Yeah, and I made him last week just because of one AB. No, then this series he goes, let me get 6 hits in this series, including a fat nuke.
Yeah.
It's Jesse Winky. I mean, again, like I said earlier, he's just so much better than DJ Stewart, and of course now that DJ Stewart's back, oh great, have them both on the roster instead of adding a versatile goat Luke Ritter that could just be here for 3 days and send him back down. But besides that, it's called DJ Stewart up. But again, just the more productive you're getting out of that corner outfield, it's again because Starling Marte is what he is, so at least you're getting
Shell of
some
himself.
getting
Pretty easy to
productivity.
say.
Yeah, getting production out of your corner outfield is not with Brandon Nimmo. And now you could shift back for at least this series at the DH position, so he's not going to hurt you defensively, which he really hasn't. He made that weird, running into the wall play in the first game, I think it was. Like, that was the first
You
time
know
we
who was
saw.
on the mound. You know why it was happening.
Oh, yeah, we know. Because everybody plays like a fucking chicken with a head, chicken with the head cut off when that guy's on the mound. But, yeah, that has been the only kind of
They hate him.
defensive, scare where you're like, you've seen Winker out there. He's been anywhere else pretty solid. But again, you got to just give as much love as I can give Jesse Winky. And again, I'm going to say something that you're going to hate. Maybe he's playing himself and coming back on another 1-year deal because you got to love rentals.
I mean, I'm not opposed to it, to be honest. If it keeps like DJ Stewart away from this roster, I'm good with it. But again, that's another story. I think that there's some really good options. Of course, we've got some people in here saying Vientos was a stud, Manaya was a stud. I feel like we keep repeating ourselves with Manaya and Vientos and Lindor and stuff. But I think that this is probably the best chance as to where I can give this to Edwin Diaz, because I feel like ever since that blown save in Arizona, that was, I mean, it was bad, like really, really bad. But one of the worst outings I think I've seen him have in a long time. But he's really bounced back well, and he's really learned well from it, throwing a lot more fastballs, which, I mean, I prefer the slider, but he just has not had any feel for it whatsoever. And we will get into Diaz in a second about, kind of how they utilize him into September. But the problem that I had with Diaz is I feel like a lot of Mets fans are kind of being very cautious in the fact that, he is coming off from injury and, they need to work him back, and the workload has not been big enough. I really think that, and we'll get into this, but I really think that at the pace that they are going, of how much they're pitching him, this is a better pace to keep him fresh. And I'm glad that they have definitely just kept going after that horrendous outing that he had in Arizona. And they've put him out 3 times, and all 3 times he's been really, really good. Let's get to the duds. What do you think?
I'm going to give it to Jose Budo because, yes, even though he did get out of that 9th inning, why the hell are you making me sweat a 9th inning against the Chicago White Sox? I get it, they're full of former top Dodger prospects and Miguel Vargas and Jacob Amaya, and then, like, obviously Lou Bob's still there, and then Benintendi being that last out. But, and he has been good, like, overall-wise, he's been, a solid reliever, especially in a bullpen that's been god-awful. He's been kind of the consistent, him and Danel Nunez. So, to see him not great, especially against the White Sox, the fastball getting hit hard. Yes, they weren't, they were just line drives, but still getting hit hard and making that game, making a sweat out of game against the White Sox is just, that automatically makes you the dud of the week.
Yeah, somebody in the chat already made sure to say it already, but yeah, this is pretty evident. I think Bader has really struggled recently. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know this was a thing until they mentioned it on the broadcast. Him being like 3 for his last, 39 or something. Like, he's been bad. Yeah. Like, I didn't realize how bad he has been. Obviously, you have the workload of the outfield that kind of gets overshadowed as to where they have a lot of options. So one guy slumping doesn't really creep out as much. But yeah, it really has not been a good one for Harrison Bader. And I think he easily goes into the dud category. You also can put Alvarez as well. He just, again, he looks lost at the plate. Andrew already let us know in that. Jose Quintana, I can also put out there. Just another laboring start, but he kept us in the game. But it just like against the White Sox, dude, you got to do something better than that. It really was just not. It wasn't a fun series like we expected it to be, as to where maybe the Mets can just destroy them and blow them out. But the Mets like to make everything interesting, so definitely tons of picks, tons of things that stood out. But like we said, um, they did get the job done, and they swept this series. They did what they needed to do, and going into a Boston Red Sox series, the different colored Sox, which I do think, and we'll get into it, I do think is going to be quite a trap series. Let's just say, I don't think that the Red Sox are as bad as advertised as people think that they are, if they're mid or not. Yeah. But anyways, speaking of individual performances, individual guys, yesterday was September 1st, which means that the rosters do expand. And instead of it just being the entire 40-man roster as it used to be, it is now 28, where you pick two, which is stupid. Let's just say that you should be able to get all options out there, but you get one position player and one pitcher. Now, when we talk about the pitching side of things, Alex Young, being the second lefty to be added to this bullpen, kind of saw that coming. He has had experience with this team already. He's been in the major leagues before. And we definitely have seen him have some good outings for us when he was up here, some bad. And it seems like him and Danny Young are the two lefties for the rest of the year. Whether they get hurt or not, I don't know. That was such a weird statement that I just had. My apologies. But we also did get the position player, which I think maybe it definitely came in as a little bit of a shock, especially with the Mets talking about, honoring this versatility and athleticism, which I think that this player does have, but not to the degree as to Luis Angel Acuna, who we all really kind of expected to be the guy, especially with the way that they talked about it. But it did not end up happening, and it was Pablo Reyes who ended up being the 28th man to add to this roster on September 1st. Now, I did ask you guys in the chat, before we get into this, make sure to vote if you have not already, but asking if you guys agree with the Mets passing on Luis Angel Acuna as a September call-up. 50% of you guys are saying yes right now. 19% are saying no. 31% are 50-50. Now, I do want to give a little bit of a player spotlight to Pablo Reyes just to let everyone know who they're getting in this type of player who is a infielder and outfield. I just want to give a little bit of a spotlight because when he was called up and announced, in surprise to a lot of Mets fans, I saw a lot of who. Who is this? Who is this guy? And I understand that, but we will let's just give a little bit of a rundown. He is 30 years old. He's 5'8", 175 pounds. Having a productive year for the Syracuse Mets after being acquired from Boston for cash consideration. So he will be facing his old team today if he does get in the game. So he might want some revenge. He was an international signing by Pittsburgh back in 2011, and he spent 2021 and 2022 in the Brewers organization for their AAA team. Why is that important? Well, we all know the connection to the Brewers being David Stearns. So definitely our current front office run by David Stearns is familiar with this guy. If you want to look at the stats at hand, obviously AAA stats are not something that you can go and take very deeply. But over 253 plate appearances, slashing 283, 361, 478, with a little bit of pop, 10 home runs. He hasn't been here for a while, so it's a little bit impressive, driving in 35 runs, 117 weighted runs created plus. He can steal bases as well. Pretty much has all those tools that you expect from a utility player. Now, obviously, there is another infield outfield guy that I'm sure Andrew would have wanted to be added to this roster if they were going this direction of veteran pieces. But Pablo Reyes, I didn't expect it. Do I care? Not much. I don't know how you feel about this. I mean, it's just I don't think we really need to give a deep opinion about it because it's not really that much, but given the spotlight on him as the September call up to add to the roster with all this youth movement in AAA, definitely a surprise. What do you think?
Obviously I was absolutely heartbroken when I saw a purchase of contract and it wasn't the GOAT himself. But the fact that what Mendoza said, it makes sense. Because the fact that Mendy said he wasn't going to play, because he wasn't going to play up here, of course, speaking about Acuna, because you got Iglesias and McNeil playing second, but Vientos playing every day at third, there's not going to be playing time. And if you're going to... Excuse me, I'm trying to do a podcast, buddy. I'm trying to do something. Yeah, I'm trying to record a video. But again, especially how we said that there was not going to be any ABs, it makes sense not to just let the kid come up here and sit on the bench, kind of like what Buck did with Vientos. It's just like letting, hey, like you'll run. But again, he is not a perfect prospect. Again, he has his flaws, and I'd rather have him play every day and end the season strong down in Syracuse to have some, build something for next year to potentially compete for a playoff, a spot on this roster or be traded. But I'm fine with it. Again, I would have preferred another person with better homers, better WRC plus, better swag, more aura, but he doesn't have the speed that Reyes provides you.
Jr., I feel you.
Shut up. No. But I understand if they want speed, Ritter's not that, but Ritter has fat nukes, so I would have preferred obviously that guy. But it makes sense for what the role they wanted. He's better than Terrence Gore, but that's kind of the role that he is. So I'm not gonna lose my shit. Again, I was heartbroken because again, purchase of contract, and this is the jabroni you buy. You got a 30 homer guy in the minor leagues. You got Mike Hessman 2.0, Travis Tyrone, get him up here. But no. But for the role that Mendy wanted, it makes sense. Not wasting and burning Acuna's month just to sit on the bench, let him play every day. It wasn't going to be an outfielder, so it made sense. But again, you get a guy who can play both infield, can give you that just in case knock wood emergency infielder because he can play both. Or again, just to continue to be that logjam in the outfield. So again, I'm not heartbroken. It's just whatever. Maybe an injury happens, something else happens, maybe have a different discussion. But for what the role that they needed, he feels that fine.
And he already made his first impression in that final game, scoring the insurance run in the top of the ninth. If that makes everybody feel a little bit better that Luis Angel Acuna isn't up here. But we've talked about Acuna before. None of us are really high on him. He's not really expected to be that incredible. I mean, I'm just not big on him. I understand that he is a marginal player that can really help us out. On the base pass, he has tools, he has versatility, but you also have a veteran in Pablo Reyes who's been around for a while, and he can play the infield, has a little bit of pop, play the outfield as well. So you definitely can plug him into a lot of different things. And then this is another point from Yuki here, which, I like the way you think, saying, it being short's a sin. It really is. Acuna's too short for baseball. It really is. But it was really weird. It was definitely really weird for the last week going into this call up because we also had the heating up of Drew Gilbert as well. He has homered like 5 times in the last 7 games. He's been red hot since coming back from injury. Which was like a torn hamstring or something like that. Yep. It was pretty serious. He was out for a while. So you saw him heating up as well. We all know about the talk of Brandon Sproat as well. You had some other arms in there in the mix instead of Alex Young, but we did go with somebody who's pitched for us. But as for compared to the position player, I think they made the right decision. Again, I would have been fine with calling up Acuna. I would have been fine if they didn't. I'm 50-50. I don't care. Again, I am not... this isn't a situation where Ryan Clifford is in AAA destroying pitchers and I'm like, okay, get this guy up here. He is ready. No, he's in double A. He's been, in and out. But with this type of situation with Acuna, where he's just a midget, right? We don't like midgets, I don't think that there is really a reason to call him up. There wasn't really any. If it all really determines as to if there is an injury on the infield, maybe you do give him a call. But again, it just doesn't seem like there was any spot for him to get actual playing time. And that's what these young players need, whether you're high on them or not. That's the only way that they're going to develop at any point at the major league level. And there just was not that opportunity for Luis Angel Acuna. And I think, yes, he has heated up recently. He has hit well recently, but it still is just not the production you're expecting, especially in a hitting environment such as AAA, where the average OPS there is like 820. So I would say that when people say things like this, Acuna is not ready, he shouldn't be up here, the stats are not, they're very underwhelming, he hasn't been good. I do agree to an extent. I think that there's tools that apply to the major league level that he can provide, but it wasn't enough to call him up to the major leagues. I mean, what else? What else do you think? Do you think that there were other candidates? Do you think? I think I'm okay with it. This is another point as well. Brad coming in saying Acuna's an Epler guy. No thanks. I like the way you think, Brad. We are not fans of Epler here. But I think, they made the right decision. Not the exact decision I would have made, but a decision that I understand to deepen this roster as compared to the situations we were in beforehand, where we've had multiple DHs on this roster. So what do you think about this whole thing? Like, do you think that Acuna has a spot here next year? Do you think that they can look at it as to where if there's an injury, they bring him up this year? I think that he's become a surplus to me. That's how I kind of look at him. I don't know about you.
Who, Acuna? Because my connection fucking acted weird.
Acuna, yeah.
Okay. Yes, and then obviously you have the big domino that is Ronnie Mauricio coming back next year, and he's going to be battling for a position as well. So, and then you have obviously the other midget as well, who I think is better than Acuna, but again, it's just like it's not that big of an upgrade. But I think Jet is better than Acuna, so you have that conversation to have as well. Plus Mauricio. Is Brett Beatty still here? That's still another conversation of another guy potentially playing second base or third base. So again, you have this logjam, and you don't think they're going to add externally. Oh yeah, that Gerbil's still under contract. So there is a lot of guys. People are going to get moved. I would think they're going to obviously think Mauricio is untouchable, but I think the organization views Jet untouchable. I think he is that guy if, let's say, they don't go out and get maybe Sasaki, or let's say they're in the Burns conversation, and let's say they do add a massive power bat. I think that's the way that they're going to add the pitcher is going to be via the trade, and I don't know who that would be. Again, we'll see if it's a guy like maybe Sandy Alcantara, Jesus Luzardo, if they re-enter, if they want to get in that crochet market. Like, there's going to be guys out there who could be, top flight, maybe even like buying low on a guy like Pablo Lopez. Minnesota wants to move some salary. He's getting really close. He's in arbitration, so maybe, buy low on a guy like him. There's always going to be pitchers out there, so, and especially with the conglomerate of middle infield, third base types, and not even adding the fact that they could add, we've seen some hintings of potentially a Matt Chapman thing. Again, that's just been kind of put crumbs, not like a full-on, like, okay, link, but, you've heard some, pieces of, little popcorn a little here and there. So, and again, you have Mark Vientos, who's playing third base as of now. If Pete Alonso's brought back, that you can't shift from the first base. You can maybe shift to the DH. So, how I've always seen Acuna if he can provide anything, if he like again when McNeil was absolutely atrocious, I would have rather had the kid up there to be god awful because at least you have the excuse of he's a kid. But if Jeff is still here and is just a slightly above league average hitter, again we think Mauricio is going to take one of the jobs potentially. But again, him coming off a torn ACL, do you want to put that pressure on him right away? Maybe not. So maybe you do
Yeah.
keep a Jeff McNeil around here just to start the year, and then you can maybe platoon him. Let's say if Pete's brought back, you'll platoon maybe him and Vientos, or in a DH, third base, kind of carousel at second base. You can have that conversation. But I think we all down the line expect Mauricio to have a spot, Vientos to have a spot. And again, we don't know what other external options that maybe Stearns has or opportunities that is put in front of him. So I'm not for me, the only untouchables in this system are Ronnie, if you still count him as a prospect,
Yeah.
Sproat, Clifford, and Drew Gilbert. But I would flip Drew Gilbert for a proven outfield star. That's kind of, but
Mm.
everybody else for me can be talked about. But like, for me, look, those are the only untouchables. So Acuna, if I can get like a Jesus Luzardo for an Acuna, I would pull that type of deal off. Pablo Lopez, that kind of stuff. So I'm not in love with. I loved him more when he wasn't in the system because again, that prospect of buying cards and that prospect and like Acuna's brother and everyone bought a lot of stuff. Now seeing him every
I don't know if he dropped out for you guys, but he dropped out for me. But again, I think that when you look at Acuna from that angle, he is definitely part of the surplus in this infield, and there are a lot of moving parts that are going to be factor in next year, and I think that that's probably you know, the biggest factor going into next year, where Luis Angel Acuna is in that equation, as compared to other pieces such as Jet Williams, or you're talking about Brett Beatty, or you're talking about uh, Ronnie Mauricio. I think that the problem that we're really facing is we don't really know what direction they are going to go in, whether they're going to aim for a young infielder, whether they're going to add another established piece of the infield again. And that also does involve Acuna in the near future, whether he contributes or not, whether he contributes to a trade. And I think that that's kind of how the Mets kind of view him right now. And that's the main reason why he wasn't called up in September, because if he came up here and he played like twice a week, he was going to play like absolute shit. There was absolutely no reason. There wasn't a spot here. We all can establish this way with Pablo Reyes, who can play either the infield or the outfield. He can add to the surplus anywhere that they have on this team. You know, it's more future conversations when you're talking about somebody like Luis Angel Acuna. And yes, I think that there is things at the major league level he can provide right now, but it just was not enough to push him over the edge to maybe compare to a veteran like Pablo Reyes, or maybe somebody who hasn't gotten a shot like Luke Ritter, or maybe compared to somebody else who hasn't gotten a shot like other guys in AAA right now, which I'm blanking on. So I feel like
Brasso
at one
or
point,
yeah, because that's what
yeah,
I thought it was going to be.
Brasso
Like,
maybe.
if they were going to purchase the contract, I again obviously biased the Gritter. Like I thought Brasso would have been the guy that because especially how they said it, he just doesn't have the speed side of it. Because I always thought, okay, Brasso would have been the guy, so I'd be like, all right, I ripped my heart out. They don't call up Ritter, they call up Brasso. But then they call up Reyes, and you're just like, okay, you understand why. So again, it's just there's still so many guys down in Syracuse, and obviously Eddie Rosario's gone. They got rid of him, and there's just a DJ Stewart's back up there. So there's just a lot of guys in Syracuse that won't be when the season starts next year. And, we'll see if Brett Beatty's there. Again, he's the other kind of guy with him blowing, again, his second year in a row of getting a finger injury in September. This guy's got a finger fetish in September. But, kind of what it is. But,
Also, his
again, will
second
he even
year
be
of
on.
sucking as well.
Well, he's got a good AAA number. That's all that matters. So, again.
No,
It is what
he
it is.
actually doesn't. Pretty subpar, to be honest.
He's got homers. He's all that matters. So
No, he
again,
doesn't. Okay.
it is what it is. Again, all most, and then we have throughout the whole system. It's not just in AAA. Again, you're starting to see the Mets moving their talent up fast, which there's a few things that happened throughout the week that continues, and throughout the year they've been moving these guys up fast. So we say, oh, there's some guys that are in A-ball right now, or Brooklyn, that we think, oh, they're 4 or 5 years away. Now they're moving now they're moving guys up so damn fast. Again, Jonah Tong being the newest and latest guy to get called up fast. So again, we'll wait and see. Though of course they're going to be a little more aggressive at pitching because again the price of pitching is getting ridiculous. So I do like that they're doing it, but when it comes to their infielders, just they got to make a move. And again, it wasn't going to be this year. As much as fans were crying at the deadline, they weren't going to trade anybody at the deadline. This was a marginal buying year if they were, which they did. They bid on the margins.
Yeah.
Did they get some? The bullpen guys. Jesse Winky's been good. I do expect, especially with a ton of financials coming off the books this year, all the 40-year-old decrepit pitchers. Is there still one more year McCann, or is that done this year?
No, that's done this year. We can wipe our hands.
Get rid again.
Completely.
Exactly. McChicken's
Get him
gone.
out of our minds.
These old 40-year-old relievers or pitchers, all that money is gone. I still think there's a team, and I'll start pushing it in the offseason. There's a team that Starling Marte makes so damn much sense if you pay half that contract down, or you could trade him and move again. Even if you got to eat $10 million, free up another $10 million. They're going to be very active, and especially now with adding the draft class that we had, plus holding on to the big prospects. If they don't get the Dominican outfielder, I do think there is a move if there is another, superstar or really good player to add to this offense. If it's in the outfield, or it's most likely going to happen in the outfield because there really is no spot on the infield. It's going to be an outfielder, which there's, we've seen in the chat a couple of names.
Not with Jeff McNeil holding down the fort.
Well, Jeff McNeil plays second base. He's not going. He's at second base.
He's our superstar second baseman.
Exactly. So it's going to be an outfield that they add. So again,
another point from Ricardo in here saying Acuna reminds me of Dilson Herrera. That's rough if that's the deal.
Hey, we could trade him for Jay Bruce. Then that works. Go get our Jay Bruce.
Yeah, that worked too.
The second time it did. The first year did.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. In regarding to the organization internally, because we all already know how they're kind of reevaluating this year, and internally, Luis Acuna is in that type of equation. Now, I do want to move on to another key point on this team. We talked about it a little bit, but I do want to talk about this kind of being a discussion as compared to what it was during the entire season, because I feel like we were kind of sprinkling it around. Everyone didn't understand what was going on, but with Edwin Diaz, the usage of him has been very odd this season. Let's just say that. And I understand the precautions that they're taking things slow, him coming off of injury. But I will say with the Mets' usage of him, I haven't been completely pleased with it. I'm not blaming it on his struggles this year, he's been very inconsistent this year. I'm not blaming it on it, but I really do think to get him a little bit more comfortable is to have him pitch as much as he has this week. Whether it's 4 out of 7 games, whether it's 5 out of 7 games, he has made it known that he likes to pitch a lot. And I think what a lot of people are all forgetting with this Edwin Diaz situation is when you're talking about rest for a pitcher, most of it is upper body, shoulder, elbow, things like that. The injury that Edwin Diaz had was not his elbow. It was a freak accident to his lower body. He tore up his knee, and obviously he needs that back knee to push off of. But you're going into September, where whether it is a safe situation, whether it's a tie game, whether it's this or that, he needs to be frequently out there. He needs to be, in my opinion, the most used reliever in that pen. And whether people do disagree with it and saw him blow a game and said, I don't trust this guy, it's 2019 all over again. Well, guess what? You're paying this guy $102 million, whether you like it or not. You should be willing to have him out there in any sort of situation, whether it's runners on base, whether it's 2 outs, 1 out, whether it's for a clean inning, a save situation, however you want to describe it. I think that the best way to look at it for Edwin Diaz is to pitch him as much as you can, because that's the only way that he is going to be sharp enough. And he's going to be sharp enough to possibly help you in the postseason. Whether you like it or not, whether you trust him or not, he is going to be very big for this team. He's one of the most important pieces to this team. So, Andrew, what do you think about this, the usage of Edwin Diaz? Do you think they're using him too much? Would you never do 3 days in a row? Would you never do him in a non-save situation? Because we've always have to bust these narratives that way. How do you feel about how it has been managed this year? Because it has been weird, let's just say. It's been very scattered. But going into September, would you be open to be like, 4 out of 7 days, 5 out of 7 days, giving him that workload that he says he's used to and wants to have? He has been very open with. What do you think?
I mean, now, especially in September, all bets should be off because you're in a pennant race. And yes, this isn't a guy who's a rental. Again, you have him locked up. He ain't going anywhere. He's got his bread. So burn him. Again, you have the ability. He's here. And they have been very laid back, as you should. A guy coming off an injury in the first half. They only used him in safe situations, as they should be. Now, I do think, especially now, because every game matters double. Every game is worth 2 pretty much the rest of the year. So if you're telling me who's the better option, Reed Garrett fresh or Edwin Diaz, 3 days working 3 days in a row in a safe situation where you need the game, I'd still rather have Edwin Diaz working a third day than Reed Garrett or Ryan Stanek or Bazaban, all those guys in that pen.
What the fuck was that? Are you okay? Did you just have a stroke for a second? What the hell was that?
That's how you say his name. Okay,
cool. Yeah, we'll just brush past that. Go ahead.
Obviously, and again, another big factor is Nunez being hurt. He gave you the ability of having that second closer, gave the ability to not use Diaz as much. Now with him hurt again, now you really have to push the envelope here, especially now with not having Nunez. And again, like I said, the games are worth more. You're in it. Every game matters. Yes, it's down to one game, and we all kind of think that series in Atlanta is going to determine it. But hey, let's say San Diego or the Cubs. Let's say the Cubs and San Diego. They go opposite directions. Now you're looking at a completely different landscape to now. Maybe you got to catch it's the Padres instead of the Braves. Every game matters double in September. And you've seen the Mets in September in past years. They don't usually, have some collapses. And obviously, they coast in September. This is not the time, especially. I don't care if it's development year. The development year or whatever the hell Stern said, that's over with now. Now it's a winning year. You added at the deadline, again, marginally, but you still added. You're in a playoff race. I don't want to hear anymore, it's a developmental. No. You're in a playoff year. You're winning. Again, you didn't really go crazy in waivers as we think. Again, there wasn't as many guys we thought would be on the waiver market. There wasn't. There's an obvious guy who's, I guess, has not been claimed for some reason. Nobody claimed him, sadly. But, this is the team you got. Unless, Ryan Stanek gets his head out of his ass and could go back to the Good Baseball Savant page in Miami, be a, not walking guy, getting the first 2 guys out and walking 3 straight guys.
I hate you. I hate you, man. We can't do this.
Because again, you need somebody else to step up. And again, I'm not banking on Stanek or Brazaban or Reed Garrett to be, elite high leverage arms and guys who I can trust to get those last 3 outs. He has to be it. And especially now, again, you kind of were very gentle with him. Now it's time to get your hands on him, get him dirty, and beat him up, and let him go to work. And this is the time to do it.
And we've really seen, I really have seen with him, going back-to-back days, and the usage this week, we have seen his stuff look a little bit sharper. He was able to get those chases on the slider, and yes, it was against a White Sox team that is horrendous and swings at pretty much everything that they see, but we really have seen him look a lot sharp as compared to, where they were just kind of resting him. They were coasting it. Him pitching 40 innings this season, and we're in September. I don't know how I feel about that, because let's not forget 2022, and I will bring up the evidence to support it. I'm pretty sure by September 2nd, he was at like 52 innings. So that's like 12 less potential outings he could have had. But again, yes, the Mets are in a situation where they usually don't have these save situations. And, sometimes they're blowing these guys out or whatever. But yeah, by the time in 2022, he pitched 53 innings. Right now, he's pitched only 42 innings. I understand you're trying to take it slow, but again, more taking it slow has to do with upper body injuries for pitchers. Nothing happened to his upper body. He is healthy. He's been on the mound all year, and it's time for them to use him like the $102 million closer that he is. And we know that he can be. Yes, he is not the top tier that he was in 2022. Do I think he will get back to it? I absolutely believe that he will, because there's still shades of it no matter what. The command just has to get better, and that will only happen with time. Will it happen this year? Probably not. As compared to what he was doing in 2022, will we see it this year? Probably not. But for them to go into the postseason, the best chance that they have, they need to give as many opportunities to Edwin Diaz when they need Diaz to perform. Anything past the 6th inning, I would put Diaz in if you need him. If you're facing the heart of the order in a tight spot, I'm putting in Edwin Diaz. If it's a tie game in the 8th and you don't really have any reliable relievers left, I'm putting Edwin Diaz in for a 6-out save. And I know it may sound crazy to everyone when they hear, well, did you see what happened in Arizona? And, it was a disaster. I'm sure it was. But they don't have a choice. He's their best bullet. He still will be their best bullet forever. Whether you want to say Daniel Nunez has been better than him, because he has been this year, he ain't available. He most likely won't come back this season, to be honest. So with Edwin Diaz, that's your best bullet. He's your best reliever. They got to put him out there. It's done. I'm done with the coddling. I'm done with, he can't come in here with runners on base. No, he can come in with runners on base. He knows what he's doing. Elite relievers are not just guys who come out there and get 3 outs in the 9th inning in a save situation. Elite relievers can do it in any single situation. That's what he did in 2022. And that was one of the main reasons as to why we were so good in 2022. We had him finishing it off in the back end of the bullpen. The game was over when he came in. Whether you trust him or not, the Mets need to trust him like the $102 million reliever that he so is before he got injured. And I think that's the best way they got to look at it. Andrew, what do you think about just the overall usage of the bullpen? Not just Edwin Diaz, kind of just setting this up. We talked about this our last episode, kind of trusting Phil Maton a little bit more. Reed Garrett probably would have to slide into a high leverage role as well, which is a little bit scary, let's just say, because we know he can lose his head. The bullpen definitely has some obstacles to overcome, let's just say. And I don't know how you would kind of utilize that. We know that Diaz is meant to be the main feature, but kind of working around that, because I'm tired of the, setting up to Diaz, to set up to Diaz, to set up to Diaz. If you need him, you need him. Go ahead and use him. Every game is a must win. So utilizing the rest of the bullpen, I mean, how are you looking at this going into September? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's still obviously has always been the biggest concern with this team throughout the whole year. You've had its ups and downs, Diaz included. He's had obviously his great moments, but again, we didn't go nuts in the big name relievers at the deadline, so this is what we got. I mean, Maton, I guess, has to kind of be the setup guy, because you got, obviously you will put, Adam Ottavino and Haskell, in the bin for right now. Danny Young has been solid. I still don't love Danny Young. I know he has, He's had some good outings. I still don't trust him coming out of the game as much. Again, it's just every time I see him, I'm like, why is this guy still here? And he gets the job done, and it's not even like he gets the job done. It's just kind of like, why him? He just looks like annoying to look at. But you have to trust Garrett. Budo.
Yeah, sure, man. Sure, good one. Go off,
Budo,
King.
Budo obviously, again, not coming off a great outing in Chicago, but again, has been a reliable arm that can give you multiple innings and hell can eat that seventh and eighth to get it to Diaz, most of the time when he's been able to use. Can you stop? Again, you have Stanek and Garrett kind of in the same class of, they can give you some good, but they can make the game real ugly real quick. So again, you went out, so you have, again, in Stanek's case, better stuff than Garrett. Garrett now has the split finger, but that's really about it. So again, you're stuck in this conglomerate of like a lot of hope and pray, and then you said maybe Nunez not coming back is that's gonna hurt, and if he doesn't come back, and maybe there's a certain ace of our rotation that potentially down the stretch potentially added. We saw some of that today.
Man, he is cutting in and out today. Jeez. I don't know what's going on with his connection. It was great last episode. I think you guys didn't see him cut out at all, but I'll let him configure that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, this is also a good point coming from Ken saying the Mets fans don't trust anyone. I mean, I trust Edwin Diaz. I've always have trusted Edwin Diaz. We already know my deal with him. And, with how they kind of sort this thing out, it is going to be interesting how they do it. Again, it all really relies on what you're getting from the starting rotation. That's another thing that comes into play, what the distance is going to be. But again, like the full-on uses of Edwin Diaz, I feel like needs to be really emphasized as compared to what they've been doing all season. This is the do or die here. Every game counts. And if you need Edwin Diaz in there, you need Edwin Diaz in there. I'm not saying pitch him every single day, but I'm saying in a week, 5 out of 7, if it's needed, it's needed. 4 out of 7 on a regular. Those are the things that they have to do. If they need Edwin Diaz, they need Edwin Diaz. And we all know that he's healthy right now. And the upper body is not, it's not hurting him right now. And that's the best. I feel like that's the best way to keep him sharp. More appearances for him, less pitches that he has to throw. And I think that that's kind of how you have to look at it for him to just stay sharp. And we're already starting to see it, like I said, going into the September, these last 3 outings that he had, he seems a lot sharper. You seem to getting a lot more swing and miss. You're seeing him get a lot less uncompetitive at bats against his opponent, putting away batters a lot better, managing contact well. So hopefully that continues. We'll see what happens. I hope that he's available tonight. I think he's going to be available tonight on back-to-back days. And going into September baseball, it's just going to be very important that Edwin Diaz gets those innings to stay sharp because they're going to need him. He is going to be very, very big for this postseason run going into October if they do make it. And there's a main reason as to why the Mets, there's a main reason as to why the Mets need to rely on him so much. It's not just the spottiness of all of relievers. It's because it's not even just his contract. It's the fact that the consistency of Diaz pretty much lies with this entire team's success. We have talked about this so many times before. If the Mets have the guy to shut it down in the 9th inning, they're in a really good position. And he really pitched well in 2022, and he was one of the main reasons as to why they were so good. And the question is as to where Ken is coming and saying, will Mendoza do this? I think that he's seen that he's been willing to be flexible with a lot of it with Edwin Diaz. And I really, again, I gave major props to him last episode talking about when Carlos Mendoza basically put him out there the next day, like right after that whole blow up in Arizona. He comes back the next day and he's able to work things out. I was glad that they didn't have him dwell on it. But, I'd like to see Edwin Diaz be pitching nothing less than, if it's a 5-run game, It's a 5-run game. Let's say they're up 8-3 in the ninth. Put Edwin Diaz in there. Don't be like, oh, yeah, well, let's burn him or whatever. But what I'm saying is, if you're on this pace as to where it's a close enough game where a couple of base runners can make this a little bit of a sticky situation when you put in somebody like Adam Ottavino or you put somebody in like that, just bring in Edwin Diaz to lock the door. And that's how I kind of feel about it. The Mets need to utilize him being the $102 million reliever. He should not just be, well, this is our closer who comes into the ninth inning. They got to utilize him in a lot different of ways. Now, Andrew, you've been cutting in and out, but if there's anything else you want to add to this discussion, because I think we all are in agreement that Edwin Diaz is just a very important part of this team. And if he's getting going, he can finish it off for us. He's a big part to this September run to the postseason, potentially.
Yes, and again, as you see, again, the bigger teams, obviously, the Padres and what they've done, obviously San Diego, Padres, they play in San Diego, Arizona, the Braves Braves actually had to do a good pen. Yes, Edwin Diaz is the most important, but they need someone else, especially now with the Nunez injury,
absolutely, I get
to
it,
go
yeah.
on that rager.
Oh yeah,
and it's supposed to be Ryan Stanek. We brought you in for your great postseason success. He had a solid outing today. Huskar on. You got the Good Baseball Savant page. I need you to be productive and not get the first 2 outs, and then he just causes complete shit show and walking guys and can't get out of the inning. Again, Reed Garrett, can you fluke your way like you did in April? Can we get an April Reed Garrett just to be a productive fluke run? And like I said before I got cut out, maybe even Kodai Senga being in the bullpen and could potentially be an X factor for the team going down the stretch in September. Again, the last week, potentially those last 2 series or 3-4 series down in the end of September. Maybe he's the X factor that this bullpen needs, especially if Danilo Nunez is not coming out. So as much as we want to give all the credit and the importance to Edwin Diaz, you see every other team. Yes, they have a great bullpen guy, but they also have great bullpens. And it's not just they only have one guy. And again, and I'll give Stearns credit.
But I will counter with that and say there's no other pen that has a $102 million reliever in it. That's the
Astros.
Thing, like
the Astros got one. They got one.
No, the Astros have a $95 million
reliever.
Shut the technicalities, bitch. I'm not the one with the glasses.
Shut up.
All right. Ricardo's saying that I know Ottavino is our whipping boy, but he has been good lately. Don't do this. Let's not do this. I get it. Yeah, he's been good in his last 2 innings. Great. Good for him. He's still horrendous. But let's just get into the usual as to where we're talking about the, you mentioned Kodai Senga, Christian Scott we have talked about a little bit, hinted with him. But let's get into the full-on injury report. Kodai Senga has begun playing catch and throwing upright from 90 feet this week as he's continuing to progress well. The Mets did mention today that he is hoping to return on that September 26th deadline when he's eligible to return. But the Mets have not ruled out him returning for the final week of the season. As we all know, on September 26th, the Mets will be facing the Atlanta Braves. So it could be a deciding factor game that Kodai Senga pitches in. Again, we still need to get him to 100%. Don't want to rush him back. But this is a lower body thing. Again, like we said with Edwin Diaz, it's a little bit different of a story. Paul Blackburn is scheduled to make a rehab assignment for AAA Syracuse on Tuesday, and he could return to the Mets rotation in no time, about 5 to 6 days after one outing, if all goes well. As we all know, he did go on the injured list last week due to a hand injury that he suffered in the middle of a game in San Diego. Sean Reed-Foley has not resumed throwing after his rehab was shut down over 2 weeks ago, and Carlos Mendoza did announce that he is likely to not return this season. So if you're hoping for Sean Reed-Foley to fill a void in the bullpen after the good campaign he was having so far this season, most likely will not happen. Christian Scott has advanced to throwing off a mound in a slope earlier this week. He threw a bullpen session last Thursday of just fastballs and changeups, tunneling pitches. And it looks like he is not going to be stretched out to being a starter for the rest of the season if he does come back. So if he does return, it most likely will be out of the bullpen, but we still don't know what that role is going to be for Christian Scott, who currently is under a tough injury, such as a UCL sprain, as compared to the lower body injuries that Kodai Senga has. So we'll see what happens with some of those pieces, of course. So tough news for Sean Reed-Foley there. Ball Blackburn should be back in about a week or two. And we're still waiting on Kodai Senga and Christian Scott as well, as they slowly progress. Now, as for progressing into the next series, let's get into the Mets versus Red Sox, which is about to start in about 20 minutes from now. Let's get into these pitching matchups. Luis Severino will take the mound tonight, as this is being recorded, against Brian Bayo. Which is September 2nd, today at 7 o'clock. That is first pitch. Game 2 will belong to David Peterson against Cutter Crawford. Also a 7 o'clock start. All these games are 7 o'clock starts. And Game 3 will belong to Tyler McGill going up against Tanner Houck. Now, again, the keys to this series, like we have said, the Red Sox don't have that big liability of a rotation that you think they do. They have some talent on this rotation, and I will tell you, there is something to look after. I'm definitely looking at this series as a trap series, so I really want the Mets to look at this as they're playing a playoff team. I know that the Red Sox most likely won't play in the playoff team, but they do have talent on this team, so it's not like they are a complete White Sox, let's just say that, where they're just a complete liability in every single aspect of the game. Keys to this series for these next 3 games. Andrew, what do you think? What do you think about the Red Sox? 3-game series, all-night games.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's like a trap series. I thought the White Sox series was more of a trap series. The Red Sox are in the same situation the Mets are. They're the first team out of a wild card. They're chasing. Do I think they'll catch down, the Royals or the Twins, or obviously the Orioles who hold those playoff spots? No, but they're the same situation that we are. They're similarly leveled teams. I think they've had an underrated rotation. They don't do anything sexy with stuff, but they just get outs. Cutter Crawford and obviously Brian Bale, who was a former top prospect, pitched all right. And then obviously Tanner Houck, who was an all-star last year. Last year, I believe he was an all-star. So again, all-star game. But they have a pretty productive rotation. Again, you have to deal with Devers and Jarren Duran, who we talked about as a buy low candidate a couple off seasons ago. Now he was an all-star MVP. Is having a productive season. They're also getting some guys, Woolen and Bray, who's had some productive APs and has a pretty good year for them this year. The bullpen still isn't. It's okay. You still got Kenley back there. They have Chris Martin, who's had a pretty solid year. So they got a decent team. I wouldn't say it's a trap series. I say it's just 2 evenly matched teams. They're kind of on the same level. Both teams are desperate to try to make the playoffs. The Mets are a little closer than the Red Sox to do that, so it should be entertaining. The only thing is, they don't have a Tyler McGill pitching in this series, so that's a problem.
Wow, you really just had to tick that in after he had a brilliant performance in Chicago. Unbelievable. Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, I can just start off with Tyler McGill. We'll see if he can build on whatever momentum that he has from the White Sox. Hopefully, I don't know, give us some kind of quality there. It looks like these first 2 games seem to be the must win because we know that Tyler McGill can lose it very, very easily. And Severino in game 1, David Peterson, the Mets love scoring 800 runs for him, so it should be very, very
Win
easy.
day, baby.
Yeah, it's win day with David Peterson. I feel like they love David Peterson and don't like any of these other pitchers with how stagnant the offense is. I am a little bit scared with Rafi Devers, let's just say, because I feel like from the right-handed side, especially from Severino, he has the type of stuff that Rafi Devers just completely feasts off of. And then, of course, when McGill leaves something over the plate, you just never know. So we'll see what happens in that series, which is going to start in about 10 minutes. And then we're going to get out of here a little bit short. We're going to cut it short a little bit, obviously, with the game coming up. And then also the fact that there aren't really many details coming from this White Sox series, which, again, like we said, they got the job done. And I think that that was pretty easy to say. And now I think we're going to open, since we do have a little bit of time, we're going to stay on for a little bit, like 10 more minutes, shall we say. We'll take some questions from the chat. And there is one from M Easy that we did get earlier on, and saying, would you guys trade for Luis Robert this offseason? I think that that's, something that they can discuss during, the offseason coming up. We don't know what direction they're going to go in. I think if I were to just answer this straight up, because I know that you have a little bit more of a creative mind going on this, but as he just cuts out there, I think when you're talking about any marquee outfielders or anybody that you think could be a top contributor to this outfield, I mean, Bader's going to be a free agent. Tyrone Taylor's a fourth outfielder. You don't expect him to be starting every day. We'll see what happens with Winker and stuff like that. But I think that the main factor with every single outfield position, it all really has to do with Starling Marte. What do they view Starling Marte as to this organization before they make any of these moves? And we all know the upside of Luis Robert. He has had a really, really rough season. But the upside's still there. He's still young. Maybe a year ago, I would have said absolutely, but now I think that there's a little bit of a hesitant ride on there. What do you think, Andrew?
I mean, again, he's an electric talent when he wants to play baseball. I just don't think he wants to play baseball right now. And would you want to play for this White Sox team? It doesn't matter
No.
what you do. You're still getting slapped and losing 197 games. Again, when you're fucking playing with a bunch of just future employees at Five Below. Not a great team, not really high on the morale scale to want to come go to the yard every day and lose. I do think he is a very interesting option if you want to keep Brandon Nimmo in the corner. I don't. His offensive value is better in center field. Again, I want my corner guys hitting 30 homers. And I guess Brandon Nimmo has had his up and down. He's hit for a little more power overall wise this year, and he has changed his approach a little bit. But I think his value is higher in center field, so I'm more willing to move him back to center and go more to elite corner bats, because I do think Starling Marte, again, is the main factor. And I do think if you eat 10 of that 20 million, you eat half. I think he would fit perfectly with the Kansas City Royals, and I'm going to be pushing that. They need outfield production. Yes, is Starling Marte the greatest thing? Do I want to see Starling Marte roam around Kauffman Stadium? I mean, that's just hell waiting to happen. I'm not gonna make sure sorry lagging. I'm like make sure I was lagging out. But do I want to see Starling Marte run around Kauffman like Lorenzo Cain and Alex Gordon, those great defenders? No, especially. But I think they are that desperate for outfielders, and I don't think they're going to be, especially spending a lot of money last year. I don't think they're going to be as aggressive in the free agent market. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the $10 million matches up to what they gave Hunter Renfroe this past offseason. So potentially him being that kind of Renfroe replacement, the Mets have to eat, even if it's 10 to 12. I still just to get rid of the spot on the roster, because I do think, and this is going to be something I'm going to be pushing in the offseason, they need two of Santander, Soto, Robert, any other like elite. I think a guy like Lars Nootbaar, Tyler O'Neill, like they need two outfielders. And if you view Brandon Nimmo as center fielder, you need two elite cornerbacks. Yeah. Plus the DH, but I think they could fill that internally, like I said, potentially with the rotation of Mauricio Ventos, if Pete Alonso's still here. But even if Pete Alonso is not here, and let's say he does walk, then you need that production out of your outfield. And especially, again, you've already seen the Soto hype, but Santander, Robert, a guy like a Lars Nootbaar buying low on him, by buying low, but trying to see what the hell the Cardinals are doing. You need to get outfielders, and that kind of market you need two, because if Brandon Nimmo is going to play one in the spot, I prefer him in center field. I know Harrison Bader has been really good defensively and has provided the value him in center. Yes, it's better than overall Nimmo's defense. I don't think it's that drastic. I think it is obviously plays Bader makes that Nimmo wouldn't, but again, overall, I prefer Nimmo's bat in center than it is in the corners, and they desperately need it. And I do think Robert back to the Robert side, I think his price has come down. And I think you need to be aggressive here and maybe buying low on a guy who has plenty of cheap team control. And especially if you're going to continue to maybe, obviously, a lot of money's coming off. If he's going to bring it back up, you need some, I would say, cost controllable, but below market value guys. And him at his peak, and with his contract, is way below the market value he can provide in center field or moving him to right because of his great arm. And then obviously, again, we'll see if it happens with the free agent bats. So I'm all for it. I teased it earlier. I would think just straight up Gilbert for Robert, I would make that trade because, again, the upside of Luis Robert is higher than a guy like Drew Gilbert. I think Drew Gilbert's more of a Nimmo type where it's like a gritty, really good player, high floor, Brett Gardner type. I saw that comp, and I'm like, it's similar. I'm saying he's got more power than Brett Gardner, but, if you're telling me I can add a guy who has, if he stays healthy, 40 homers, 40 steal kind of potential, and elite defense when he cares. I know this year you've seen some low lights at him in center field. He just doesn't care. And you can tell he doesn't give a shit. So if you can get him on, let's say, 80 cents to the dollar, and let's say you don't get Soto, and I'm not saying he's comparable to Juan Soto, but then if you're pivoting to Robert and Santander, that is a way better outfield that you're adding more power, adding speed in Robert that this team desperately needs, especially if you're losing a guy like Pete Alonso.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that Pete Alonso, it's still up in the air of what they do with him. I don't think that they're going to be full-on aggressive to, just slap $250 million in front of him after the year that he's had, which, again, different story there. But when it comes to Robert, when it comes to the outfield, we already know when it comes to players, we all know I love my power corner outfield guys, which the Mets don't seem to really go for. It never really seemed to be a thing. You know how I love my Jock Petersons, my Anthony Santanders. Even if you want to count Yordan Alvarez as a corner outfielder, even though he's more of a DH. Guys that can provide power. Also talking about a guy like Santander who can provide power from both sides of the plate as well, where his bat just covers so much of the zone, which would be so great. Luis Robert, I think it all really has to do what he's it's not really just like anything of the asking price, because I know that Reinsdorf is not a fan of Cohen, and it doesn't seem like he wants to do any business with him whatsoever. Same thing goes for Artie Moreno. But I think that in that aspect, it all really has to do with the asking price. If it's one of a Gilbert, one of those guys, maybe I consider it. But if you're looking at like 2 or 3, or like towards like let's say the tier of package the Giants wanted back for Blake Snell, like if we're getting into that territory, then I would probably slow my roll on that, because I feel like it's more of a buy low right now. And I feel like the Mets need to treat it as a buy low, because he's coming off of his worst career year. He hasn't really been healthy for most of it, and he just really has not been producing. I understand playing in Chicago, that team is horrendous. We just saw how bad they are. But when we talk about somebody like Luis Robert, there is some risk involved, let's just say, because you don't know what you're going to get. But we all know the endless upside and the tools that a lot of guys on this team really don't have. But again, I think that the main factor in that, whether you're talking about Drew Gilbert sending him the other way, or Drew Gilbert still being here with getting Luis Robert, which may be a little bit impossible when you think about it, I think that the main factor is Starling Marte. Marte is the guy you have to look at for that. We talked about this in the offseason when Teoscar Hernandez was signed. If Starling Marte wasn't stinking up $20 million of the payroll in the outfield, they probably would have Teoscar Hernandez right now playing for the Mets. And that goes as well for other outfielders that were on the free agent market as well, which I can't really seem to remember at this current point. I think when we look at something like with Marte, of that factor, talking about moving Starling Marte to DH, no thanks.
No.
I'm good.
No.
I don't need my DH. I don't need my DH just being specialtied in singles. DH is a power position, not just to keep him healthy. He has 1 year left on his contract next year. I'm not I'm not really solidifying that, but I saw Marte as a non-factor going into this season, and he's still here. So we'll see what happens. But I think when we look at it from just with Luis Robert in general, I think that he definitely will fill a toolsy gap that the Mets don't have. I feel like it's something that they do need to consider with the outfield as to how they're going to plug this thing in. I would love to bring Winker back. Bader, I'm kind of no thanks. Taylor's probably going to be here next year. But yeah, it all just really depends on Marte. I mean, anything else you want to add on that situation, you can. But other than that, I think we'll wrap things up here.
Yeah, again, like I said, I'm not open to moving Gilbert unless it's for like that proven guy, and I do think that upside of Robert is worth the risk because again, Stearns has been very, passive. Scared money don't make money. But again, it's just talking about the overall outfield's perspective. Nemo's going to be here. Bader's gone. Again, I'm fine with Tyrone Taylor being that, fourth guy. I'm fine with that, bringing him. He's going to be here. Yeah, we talked about the Jesse Winky. Again, it'd be more of a DH platoon if you were to try to get a guy that slaughters left-handed pitching. Maybe you could run that. But again, if you bring back Jesse, and you have Tyrone, you still have Nimmo, and then Marte again being that big conglomerate of what is he? And again, like I said, if you pay $10 million, that's kind of what in this open market now. $10 million is kind of your league average outfielder. Again, Hunter Renfroe went for that. I forgot who else was. Jesse Winker went for less than that, but like anywhere from that $8 to kind of $10 million, that's kind of what your league average or slightly below league average on the free agent market's going to be. So can you sell a team like again the Kansas City Royals who need production about at both DH and outfield positions? They got like MJ Melendez and they just claim Grossman and Pham just to add outfield depth because Kyle Isbell's getting ABs every day. They're a team that desperately can just insert a name and a veteran into that youth, young crew in Kansas City. They're still relatively really young, so they could maybe add that veteran presence for $8 to $10 million if you're eating, let's say, 10 to 12. That's a very appealing piece. Again, can you buy a team? Maybe you send them back to Pittsburgh. They need outfield. Again, they could use some outfield potentially. Again, they have Brian Reynolds. They're on a team on the rise. Maybe you could bring him back into a reunion, and you're just buying down the contract. But that's going to be the main talking point of the offseason. It's just what the hell do they do with Starling Marte? And again, that's why I was kind of hoping when he come back, have a really good last month of September to boost his trade value for someone to maybe take a chance and just to get that money off the books.
Yeah, it's possible. We'll see what happens. Again, it's about the equation. The Mets have a lot of quantity in that outfield, and they're going to have to dupe the thing out. Some of the guys are guaranteed to stay. Some of them are not. We also have a prospect as well who's knocking on the door of the majors as he's getting hot in Syracuse. So we'll see what happens, and we'll also see what happens tonight as the Mets continue their chase for that final wildcard spot. They're one game out behind Atlanta. Atlanta does not play tonight, so if the Mets win, they will be a half a game out of that final wildcard spot behind Atlanta as we continue to count down the games. About 25 games left, I believe. September baseball is here, the most important part of the season to make that final playoff push, and hopefully the Mets can grab it. We got to keep it one game at a time, and Mets-Red Sox is coming right up in a few minutes. For those of you, go ahead, enjoy the game. For those of you who were in here the entire time, thank you for watching, listening. For those of you who tuned in live, for those of you who came in for a little bit, for those of you who were here the entire time, thank you guys so much. Remember to follow us on TikTok to get us to that 1,000 follower threshold. We are very close, so we can stream this to TikTok. So a lot of our other audience over there that tunes into Frank's post games as well can just easily watch our streams whenever we go live. Then make sure to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel if you have not already. Turn on post notifications. We are regularly recording live on Sundays and on Thursdays, following every single series of games, whether the series lines up or not. And of course, the audio version at 9 a.m. the following day. Make sure to follow everyone individually, including our third co-host, Frank, who is not here today, but I'm sure he'll be back the next time. Enjoy the game. For those of you who are in the chat live right now, let's go Mets, and we will see you guys next time.